Alright, welcome back. This is Unit 3.3. Again, we're doing this over 2 days, so I'm going to cover the whole thing. Factoring quadratics when the leading coefficient is not 1. Alright, so this would be a case, in the last time we had problems that were, all of them were like perfect. They didn't have any numbers in front of like the v squared. And then when we did have ones where we did have numbers in front, our a values, we could factor those out, okay? But for this session, we are going to have situations where we cannot factor out enough to be able to have a equals 1, all right? So let's do a quick review. It says factor each expression completely. So here we'd do our glasses. Get negative 9x squared, and we want to find two things that multiply to give us that and add to give us a positive 8x. Okay, so looking at that, I kind of told you a trick that if this is negative, this number is the difference between those two numbers. So they're 8 apart. So it's got to be 1x and 8x. Oops, sorry. 9x, okay? But this is negative, so we've got to make one of these be negative. It would probably need to be the negative 1, and that would end up giving us our positive 8x. So since a, the number in front, there's not 1, okay, that would be a equals 1. You could put a 1 there and it wouldn't make any difference. We can use the shortcut, so x minus 1 times x plus 9. Okay. Here we also talked about taking out the greatest common factor so that we can have x equals 1 or a equals 1. So here we could take out a negative x from all three terms. That would give us negative x times x squared plus 2x minus 4, or no, minus 8. Sorry. Okay, so we're just dividing all of this by a negative 8x. Now that we have that, we can do our glasses. That gives us a negative 8x squared. We want to find a number that multiplies to give us that and adds to give us 2x. Right? So I'm thinking maybe a positive 4x and a negative 2x. That would give us 2x and multiplies to give us negative 8x squared. So again, we can use our shortcut. We have negative x already. We have our two parentheses. We'll do x plus 4 and x minus 2. All right, so now let's look at some situations where we can't factor out the greatest common factor. So all of these, we have a leading coefficient that isn't 1. For A, it's 2. For B, it's 3. For C, it's 5. For D, it's 8. Okay, but we can't factor out a greatest common factor. And I kind of talked about this before. We went over it already, so this isn't really anything new. We're still going to do our glasses. That gives us negative 8n squared. We want to find two numbers that multiply to give us that and add to give us a negative 7n. Okay, so my guess is probably going to be, and man, you just gotta try things out, see if it works. Okay, we can use 1 and 8, we could use 2 and 4, and that's pretty much it. How could we possibly get up to a 7? Okay, well, we could use a negative 8n and a positive 1n. That would give us negative 7 and multiplies to give us negative 8. Okay, so we would substitute that in. We'll still have our 2n squared, but then we'd have our negative 8n plus n, and then we still have our negative 4. We do it by grouping. Okay, so that's the only difference between when a is 1 and a is not 1, is that we need to do grouping. Okay, so we can factor out a 2n, divide it by 2n, that gives us 2n times n minus 4, and here greatest common factor for the right side. Okay, it looks like we can't factor anything, so we will just factor out a 1. So we'll have plus 1 times n minus 4. So these are the same. We'll factor that out, n minus 4, and we're left with 2n plus 1. Okay, you can always check by distributing, get your original problem. Okay? Same thing. So all these are just the same. So if you can, please pause, and there'll be some problems that maybe would look a little different. So, I mean, it's kind of nice or good to go over these, and then you can ask me or watch the video to come up with the ones that you're struggling with. So negative 3x squared times negative 4 gives us a negative 12x squared. And then they need to add up to give us 11x. Okay, so again, since this is negative, this is telling us the difference between the two numbers. So basically, we're going to do 1x and 12x, but we've got to figure out which one is positive, which one's negative. So negative 1, positive 12 would give us a positive 11. Okay, now we can't use our shortcut, right? A is 3. Okay, we can't use the shortcut, so we're going to do substitution. We'll do 3x squared minus x plus 12x. Okay, this is coming from here, and then minus 4. Group, we can take out an x, 3x minus 1. Here we can factor out, maybe we should write that down, x divided by x. Here we can factor out a 4, sorry. So we'd have plus 4 divided by 4 would give us 3x minus 1. Okay, again, they're the same. 3x minus 1, and then x plus 4. Okay, practice, practice, practice. I mean, after eventually, you won't even have to think about it, okay? Maybe, so if you have any questions, let me know. Again, classes, negative 30a squared, add up to give us negative 13a. Okay, so the difference between those two is 13. So we could do something like 2 and 15 would probably work. So negative 15a plus 2a. All right, so we'd have 5a squared minus 15a plus 2a minus 6. Greatest common factor here, you could factor out a 5 and an a. So we'd have 5a times a minus 3. Here we can factor out a 2. So plus 2 times a minus 3. Let's get a minus 3 times 5a plus 2. All right, same thing. Negative 8x squared equals 2x. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to give us negative 8 and add to give us 2. So this is, again, since it's negative, that's going to be a difference between the numbers, so probably 4 and 2. So we could do a positive 4x and a negative 2x. So we'll have 8x squared plus 4x minus 2x minus 1. Group it up. Okay, so factor out a 4x. So we'll have 4x times 2x plus 1. Here, greatest common factor, so we have a leading negative, so we're going to factor out a negative. So we'd have minus 1 times 2x plus 1. So basically we switch the signs, what's inside the parenthesis. Okay, so our parentheses are the same, 2x plus 1, and then everything else would be 4x minus 1. Whew, man, it's getting kind of boring. All right, Just keep doing the same things. So but you need the practice, so sorry. Okay, so multiply, or get negative 30x squared, add to give us x. So again, since this is negative, this is just going to be the difference, is going to be 1. So they've got to be right next to each other, like 5 and 6. So we could do positive 6x minus 5x. That would give us x. Multiply, that gives us a negative 30. So we got 6x squared plus 6x minus 5x minus 6. Wait, did I miss something up? Feel like I'm missing. Oh yeah, there it is. Sorry. Erase. This should be a 5. This is a 5, and this is a 6. All right, so cut it in half. We do our grouping. Take out an x. That leaves us with x times 5x plus 6. Here we can factor out a negative 1. So we'd have minus 1 times 5x plus 6. So we'd have 5x plus 6 times x minus 1. Okay, again, multiply. That gives us a negative 56m squared. Add up to give us a negative 2, or a negative m, sorry. Okay, again, since this is negative, this is going to be the difference, so they've got to be right next to each other. Something like 7 and 8. 7 times 8 is 56, so we could do negative 8. It's going to be negative, so the bigger number has to be the negative one. Negative 8m plus 7m. Okay, so 28m squared minus 8m plus 7m minus 2. Okay, that looks about right. Cut it in half. Okay, greatest common factor here would be 4m. Okay, 28 divided by 28 divided by 4 would give us 7m, and negative 8 divided by 4 gives us a negative 2. Okay, greatest common factor. We can't factor out anything, so we'll just factor out a 1. Plus 1 times 7m minus 2. All right, so we'll end up having 7m minus 2 times 4m plus 1. All right, so I think that's pretty much it for that. Let's look at some of these problems. Okay, so this is just something that will be probably on your homework quizzes or tests. Okay, just fill in the blanks. All right, so looking at that, what could we put in there? So kind of the trick here perhaps is, like, if we were to check our answers, well, I don't know. Okay, when a equals 1, all these are going to be a equals 1. So what we'll do is we will always, if we add these, let's see. Because when we do kind of our glasses, we multiply them, that gives us 40. Okay, and that's what we end up having here. If we multiply them, that gives us negative 40. Okay, but when we do our that'd be our negative 40, okay? Yeah, let's do that. That's a good way to do that, okay? So let's do that kind of factor tree. Would give us negative 40x squared. And instead of trying to find out we're trying to find the middle term. We know what's going to go in here, because it's kind of like the opposite of what we've been doing. So that would be like a negative 4x and a positive 10x. So all we're really needing to do is add those two numbers. So that would end up giving us 6x. So this would be plus 6x. Okay, and that would be your solution. Okay, B, same sort of thing. If we multiply those together, that gives us our 16. If we add them together, that gives us our middle term. Okay, The thing is that you probably would maybe have the mistake is you would maybe say, well, this would just be plus 10. Okay, don't forget there should be an x there. Okay? And it kind of helps when you write this thing out. So if you do that, you'll be just great. Okay, so again, we're doing our glasses. That gives us 12x squared. We want to find two things that multiply to give us 12. Well, that is our negative 3x and our negative 4x. Okay, all we need to do is add those together. So that gives us a negative 7x. Okay, again, sort of thing. Negative 7x squared. That would give us our negative 1x and our positive 7x. Add those together, that gives us 6x. So this would be our positive 6x. Okay, and then there's some other types of problems that are a little different. Here there's different ways, different solutions, and you'll still get your same answer. So two things that will multiply to give us a negative 30x squared and equal anything you want. Okay, so there's like anything you could possibly use that you could multiply to give us a negative 30. You could use negative 2 and a positive 15, and that would work. You could use a positive 2 and a negative 15. You could do 1 and 30, or negative 1 and 30, or 1 and negative 30. Okay, there's so many choices that you can multiply to give us a negative 30. So as long as you find those two numbers that will multiply to give us negative 30, then we would just fill in the rest. So negative 2x plus 15x, well, that ends up giving us 13x. So positive 13x. And that would be a solution. Like I said, let's do another one that would give you a different solution that would also be acceptable. So x squared, or negative 30x squared, you could do negative 5x and a positive 6x. Okay, that would end up giving us x. So your solution here would be x minus 5 and a positive 6. Okay, so there's lots of different ways. On your homework, I'll give you a list of many, and if there's others that aren't on there, then you could show it to me and I'd say, yeah, that's good. All right, same sort of thing. Basically, what are two numbers that will multiply to give us a negative 6x squared? Well, you could do negative 2x and a positive 3x, and that would end up giving us a positive x. So minus 2 plus 3 and just a positive x. Okay? Again, different possible answers. Okay? Again, 1x squared. Okay? Well, the only thing that can multiply to give us 1, if we're using like whole numbers or integers, would be 1x and 1x. You could also do negative 1x and a negative 1x. Would still multiply to give us a positive 1x. Okay, and you add those together, it gives us 2x. So we'll do positive 2x and plus 1 and plus 1. Okay, you can also distribute here to make sure that it works, or you can factor here and see that it works on the right side. Okay, so the other option for this one, there's only two. You could also have negative 2x and a negative 1 and a negative 1. Okay, here again, 24, two numbers that multiply to give us 24x squared. You could do 1 and 24, 1x and 24x. That would give us 25x. So plus 25x plus 1 and plus 24. Okay, lots of choices. All right, and then these last two, I think... remember why I put this on here. Oh yeah, that's right. So I think some of these you can factor out I don't know, maybe it's just the first one. So here you can factor out a GCF. All right, we can factor out a 2. That'll give us 2 times 2n squared minus 7n minus 4. And then we would do our grouping. So this is kind of where a is not 1 and we have a GCF. Okay, so here we'd get negative 8n squared, and we want to give us a negative 7n. So again, this is negative, so we know that this is the difference between those two, so it's got to be 1 and 8. So negative 8n times a positive 1n gives us a negative 8n squared, and then if we add those, that gives us a negative 7n. So we'll have 2n squared minus 8n plus n minus 4. We'll do our grouping. So we can factor out 2n. So we'll have 2n times n minus 4. And here we factor out a 1. So we'll have plus 1 times n minus 4. So we'll have, these are the same, so we'll factor that out, n minus 4. And then 2n plus 1. And then we have our GCF. Don't forget that. And we'd be done. Okay? I think I meant to do all of these where you'd have to do all of them. But looking at these, there's not other GCFs. So I think I'm just going to leave these ones alone. Okay, I just wanted you to realize that you could have both. Okay, you would have to do the GCF. A would not be 1, and we would need to do grouping. So this is pretty much the hardest type of problem that we're going to run into. Okay? All right. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or have any comments. Thanks.